And it looks like we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our very first keynote of Wakelet Community Week 2023, Beyond Digital Citizenship and Empowering Students Online. Digital citizenship is one of those subjects that is so important for student development, both inside and outside of the classroom. And everybody here at Wakelet is so proud to be supporting digital citizenship incentives and projects across the world. We see so many people in our community share digital citizenship resources and projects and initiatives constantly online. And we always try to amplify them because it's something that we think is very close to our hearts. And we think that the Wakelet platform is absolutely perfect when it comes to helping students discover and understand who they are online and offline. So we'll be sharing all of the resources talked about during this session in the chat, along with information about how to claim your certificate. So as always, we love to hear all of your ideas and your suggestions and your comments. So please leave them in the chat and share your thoughts throughout this keynote. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our keynote speakers, Jennifer Casa-Todd and Michael Drezet. Take it away, guys.
Thank you so much. We're so honored and thrilled to be here. It's so great to see people from all over the world joining us for this what we think is a very important topic. So let's get started with our presentation, and you will have access to the presentation if you follow that bit.ly/Wakelet. DigCit23, and that of course will be added to the resources. So we're excited about that. So a bit about who we are. Michael and I met in person at Google Innovator Academy in New York in 2019. Before that, we were friends online. I am an author, a keynote speaker, a Google Certified Innovator and Trainer, an ISTE Digital Citizenship PLN Award winner, the co-founder of the Global Student Chat, which you will learn a little bit more about today. I'm also a student voice amplifier, and I love to show teachers, parents, and students how they can use technology and social media to make the world a better place.
And I am Michael Drezek, and I am also a Google Certified Innovator and Trainer. I am joining you from Lakeshore Central School District outside of Buffalo, New York. I've also contributed to some different publications and books, including DigCit Kids, which is one of my favorites. I'm on the Global Maker Day organizing team, and I am also a member, a teacher leader at the Global Student Chat. So really excited to share Beyond Digital Citizenship with you all today here for Wakelet Community Week.
So we're going to get started with a really quick find out a little bit more about you. It's called That's Me. So the first That's Me, and all you're doing is putting in the chat, that's me, if that's you. I remember my first phone, smartphone, and it definitely wasn't an iPhone. In fact, mine was a Nokia flip phone. So would love to hear what yours is.
And I have one. The first video game I played was, we know games bring us together. Thinking back, I'm a child of the 80s, and I can remember being in my cousin's basement who was a little bit older than me, and him showing me an Atari, and me trying to play the game Pitfall and not, get swallowed up by the pit. So that was it for me. And I'd love to hear what some of your first video games that you've played were. It'll show us the age of our audience, I'm sure, depending on what kind of responses we get there.
Exactly. Nokia flip phones and Pac-Man for me. That's me if you believe digital citizenship should be embedded and student-centered. I feel like that's why maybe you're here.
And is it you, if you believe that there isn't one clear-cut definition of what digital citizenship is? And that's why we're having this conversation here today. So we'd love to get your thoughts on that in the chat.
All right, so we invite you, and this is a great image that Michael and I just found because it was one that was shared with us at the Google Innovator Academy in New York. What's the first thing you see when you look at this image? Here's the reality. This symbolizes technology in so many ways, doesn't it? we can see the drawbacks or the evils, but there's also so much good that can be had. It's really just a matter of perspective. And this is where the digital citizenship conversation really comes in.
So I got to give share a quote here from Kevin Honeycutt, who's always sharing some great ideas and insights around technology. This is back from ISTE 2013. And here we are 10 years later approaching ISTE 23. And he says, kids are growing up on a digital playground and no one is on recess duty. And many of you may have that same thought today, right? We kids are immersed in their devices, and really who's on that playground supervising? And this sparks a conversation, and I think we're wired to think about the negatives and what could go wrong. And our kids today are still growing up on that digital playground. They can easily get connected, better than they could than in 2013. But we need to think about maybe how they can be empowered to use tech for goods, and how adults can shake the mindset that all tech is bad, right? We know there's dangerous sports out there, but it doesn't mean that kids shouldn't play them. They just need, as athletes, to train and protect themselves to thrive in a potentially dangerous environment, right? The risk is always going to be there, but it can't be the focus, right? Because then we maybe lose sight of the big picture. So just think a little bit about what that quote maybe means to you today. And then, going back to that picture that was shared on just a few slides ago was, that good versus evil, the good and evil together. And, I'm going to another quote here, that our cell phones have more power than all of NASA had back in the late 60s when they placed 2 astronauts on the moon. So we carry this device around in our pocket. And, what do you see there? Do you see an opportunity? Do you see danger? Can it be both? And, what do we do with this power that we have sitting in our pockets today? And, the reality is that all DigCit isn't created equal. When we think about this, the work gets back to the core of citizenship, right? We need to think beyond just internet safety and responsibility, but, how we can navigate these spaces and contribute to the well-being of our communities. I like to think that powerful experiences are powerfully unique. Communities have unique needs, and individuals have unique skill sets. So we need to really leverage these. And in this work, you'll discover, if you haven't already, ultimately, that we believe, and I feel, that there's no one size fits all definition of digital citizenship, going back to the "that's me" in the opening activity. And this brings us to kind of how digital citizenship has shifted through the recent years. And we really like what ISTE has done with their pillars and competencies here. It's multi-layered. No one of these is more important than the other. They're all just pieces of the digital citizenship puzzle. But we find that we've been spending a lot of our time in the engaged competency or pillar. Really, this is where we're finding that a lot of the student-centered work in our classrooms is falling. Not to say that we don't have conversations and activities around all of those other ones, but I think we're going to spotlight some of what we see as engaged here within our DigCit work.
And what we're going to do now is just highlight some of the really great resources that are out there that I'm sure many of you are using. Please continue to use the comments. Unfortunately, we don't have access to the comments section, but we love to see all of the sharing. DigCit commit resources found at digcit.com/org really align with those DigCit competencies and that framework. And we find it to be positive more than anything. I'm sure many of you by now have used Common Sense Media. They have exceptional resources. Google's Interland for younger kids, very game-based and play-based, also very positive and useful for young kids. Pear Deck has done a really good job partnering with different organizations and creating interactive slide decks. And they have a collaboration with Everfi, and they also have a collaboration with Google's Interland, which is really cool. Media Smarts, for any of you that are in Canada, is a great Canadian resource. There are lots of great resources to also be found in Google's Applied Digital Skills. And if you're a Microsoft board or district rather, then you might be looking at some of the Microsoft Learning Centers. But we're here to talk about beyond digital citizenship. And those are great resources. But our greatest resource, friends, is our students. And both Michael and I are absolutely committed to student-centered learning experiences. So why should not or could not digital citizenship be a part of that? In terms of research, elements of successful district implementation of digital citizenship and media literacy education, a report to the legislature said that districts include students as active participants, role models, and peer mentors to address topics of online safety, media literacy, fair use, online identity, digital communications, and collaboration. And that is most effective, according to that report. Those of you that follow the work of John Hattie and the meta-analyses that he does, you know that peer tutoring and peer influence are listed as high impact strategies for learning. And in, I'm going backwards here. In a paper, Digital Citizenship in K-12 schools, the researchers state that it takes a village to address issues of digital citizenship. And if you work in a school or you work in a district, you know that that is absolutely true. So who is this village? Who does this village of youth consist of? And primarily they say that these consist of digital citizenship curriculum, peer mentor programs, effective role models, using a proactive versus reactive approach. And in my book, Social Media, I'll never forget this line. It was by a young girl named Naja Marshall to Nancy Watson. And she said, adults are always telling us what not to do online, but they never show us what we should do or how we should act. And I know that this is something that I'm culpable of as well, because we have limited time, we have limited resources. So we want to get at the how to stay safe, but that doesn't always stick. And students don't find that to be embedded and fulfilling sometimes. So this is a great visual that we're going to use throughout the presentation to basically signify what that is. So moving away from what not to do to showing students what to do. And what we're going to do is provide some examples from our own experiences for how we empower students in leadership roles in online spaces.
And before we dig into, our specific examples of what this looks like in our classrooms and in our schools, we like to think at the very basic level, in addition to digital citizenship, shifting some common language can be the start of shifting culture, right? We all have acceptable use policies or AUPs. They're very much needed legally and to protect students and school communities, right? But how can we do them better? How can we take our current language of what's acceptable and start to kind of shift that to move towards responsible use policy and ultimately to an empowered use policy, right? I think the language we use is critical. And, looking at an acceptable use policy, right, presented in the form of what students should not do. And there's things that we need them not to do, right, to make everything work in the course of a school day. They define the rules and regulations that students must follow and employees must follow, right? Are they restrictive and prohibitive? It outlines the consequences of what will happen if the students do not follow the rules, right? So we see those currently in schools all over the world, right? And again, they're necessary. But as we shift to a responsible use policy, to an empowered use policy, and we can simply co-construct expectations with students in this conversation, right? Are we involving the students in our planning of these policies? It's really what they should do, right? Clear and explicit co-constructed expectations, and invite them to really foster a school community that is respectful and kind. I think we all realize that school is a better place to be when we're in that environment. And then really just some thoughts on, how does that become an empowered use policy? Really, we think this becomes a reality when students are at the center of it, right? The result is a shared vision. And this gives everyone, including the surrounding community, the feeling that students are using technology powerfully and positively, right? And access to this is seen as a privilege due to the opportunities it presents. So it's really just shifting that language and shifting that mindset. And I know so many of you out here joining today are really pushing that work forward along with students, which is absolutely huge.
Absolutely. And I love in the comments how many of you are sharing, that you believe that this is as important as we do, but so many of you sharing how you do this in your own context, which I think is amazing. So that at the very basic level is a way that we can move digital citizenship conversations to a more student-centered approach. I want to share with you an example of something that we've done at our school that really takes us to a next level in terms of peer mentorship. And this is, and I keep going backwards, friends. I'm not sure why. Oh dear. All right. Let me start with this story. And that is that our principal came to a meeting and said to us, I have this really great keynote speaker who could come and do a workshop with students. This was in our anti-bullying committee. And one of the students, really brave young woman, said, that sounds good, but I feel like the kids really look up to us. Wouldn't it be great if we could do workshops for them? And the principal and I kind of looked at each other and we thought, yes, actually, it would be great. So we decided, I engaged a classroom teacher of teaching a leadership course. And we thought, what might this look like with our grade 12 students teaching workshops to younger students? And so we engaged in the design thinking framework by IDEO, and we started on this journey. We first decided to have kids define the problem. So what problem are you trying to solve in our school around anti-bullying, positive school culture? And they brainstormed on chart paper, really important because then they didn't feel committed and they had lots of ideas to share. And then they went around to each of the chart papers and talked about what resonated with them. Like, yes, you're right, this is a problem, or I have never even thought of that. And that worked really well. And this is where I think it's so significant that we engage students in this work, because what we perceived as problems were different, number one. And number two, oh my gosh, Michael, can you advance the slides? It's crazy.
I can do that, yeah.
Yeah, so so what we thought of wasn't necessarily what the students thought of. And what became very clear is, so one of the problems that they perceived was healthy relationships and boundaries online, for example. And so these healthy relationships and boundaries, when we talk about them as teachers, we talk about them very much in terms of online and offline. What does a friend look like online? And what does a friend look like offline? And certainly this was not the case with students, because when we think about what they do, their online and offline world is completely enmeshed. For us, some of us who are older, we remember, right, offline and offline. And that is definitely not the reality for our students. And that became very clear with this work. The next thing we did was we asked them to empathize. So who are you trying to help? What do you know about them? So actually create a case study for a grade 9 student who is struggling with something being shared online, or feeling like they're addicted to social media, or trying to put their first best foot forward. And this was really wonderful as well. The next stage was to ideate. So they had to brainstorm what the possibilities were. We used Post-it notes, but you could certainly, if you're in a blended environment, you could use Jamboard if you're in Google, or Whiteboard if you're in Microsoft. And they started to brainstorm ideas around what they wanted to teach, what they wanted their workshop to look like. And what we did was I provided them with a Wakelet of resources. These are not teachers, these are students. So examples of those wonderful resources that we shared already, and students were able to look at them. But then we were able to, because Wakelet allows for people to contribute to a collection. And so we shared that code with students. And in fact, what they did was when they found something really great, they were able to add to the Wakelet as well, which again was extremely powerful. Then they began the work of creating. They got all of their Post-it notes and they formed them together in terms of themes that they saw happening. And they started to formulate a rough copy for a lesson. The test stage is what's working and what needs to be modified. And we did this on several levels. The principal and the vice principal were invited to give their own feedback. They were astounded by the student ideas, the way in which they had sort of changed the direction of some of these workshops. Myself and the classroom teacher also gave them feedback. And then they engaged in a test run with students in the class. And I think what was so powerful about this too is we always talk about, you know, kids being able to communicate with one another and constructively criticize one another and respectfully disagree with one another. But how often do we actually give them the opportunity to do that? So that testing stage, that feedback loop was so critical because students were really trying to be critical in their feedback so that they can make their workshops even better, which I thought was amazing. And I was hoping that they would have shared before this presentation, but their sharing actually happens tomorrow. Their presentations are so fulsome, ready to go. They're so excited to be in a mentorship role. The teachers that are hosting them in the younger grades, in the grade 9 and 10, are absolutely excited for this process as well. And I can't wait to blog about it and share the experience in its totality. So here is an example. We could tell students about how they should navigate issues online. We could just focus on those really great resources out there, or we can empower students to lead conversations and mentor young students.
All right. So thanks, Jennifer. At Lakeshore Central Schools, we were recently awarded a DigCit Community Award from the Digital Citizenship Institute for embracing a school community approach to what this looks like, really putting students at the center, which we take a great pride in, right? It's become a point of pride. The district is very proud of it, but we realize that, you know, it doesn't end here. Well, congratulations. You guys have been doing amazing work. We realize that in this digital citizenship work, as the world is evolving and as this technology is rapidly advancing, this work is really never finished, right? So I really like this quote that, you know, it's not even a quote. I just, you know, this is my thinking, is that sometimes you find meaningful digital citizenship work, right? We're looking at the resources, we're finding ways to engage the students, but sometimes meaningful digital citizenship work finds you. And this was the case with what happened in January of this year. Right. We're gathered around the TVs. We're watching our favorite football team here in Buffalo play the Buffalo Bills. And we had a player, Damar Hamlin, collapse on the field. Never in my lifetime have I ever seen a game get canceled. Right. So, you know, how does this tie into digital citizenship? Well, you know, as the messages, were shared and outpoured online, we were trying to make sense of, you know, a game turning so serious that it became life and death, right? There was Pray for Damar. People changed their profile images. We see our communities gathering. And then, you know, I guess we started to look at the trauma that may have been experienced by, number one, the players on the field, the coaching staff, the people watching on TV. This was serious stuff. And, you know, in our schools, we saw things start to take shape, right? We eventually learned that he was going to be okay. He had a long way of recovery, right? We have that heart symbol, and you could see the students decorating the hallways with the 3 ways that they show love. And wow, something that happened offline, you know, how does that trickle into online spaces? I mean, we really came together in online spaces globally as a result of this. But what happened at Lakeshore was pretty neat. What we had was our leadership in action class create a CPR clinic for coaches, for teachers, for captains of athletic teams. They gave out wristbands to show that the people committed to learning CPR. In addition to CPR, learning where the AED devices, right, the same device that saved Damar Hamlin's life, where those were located around the school. You know, bringing awareness, and then the campaign of schools that don't have these devices, how they can get them in their schools, because it could potentially be a life-saving and a life-changing action that they're taking. right? So how is this digital citizenship? This is taking place offline. And, you can see here that our students used Canva to create infographics. They hung posters around the schools. They did how to perform CPR, how to run the AED devices. They used WeVideo to create those, right? So they're pulling in Canva, like I said, posters hanging around the school, lots of different things, spotlighting things on Eagle News. And, this work, which we're grateful for, then transitioned into, well, what about the mental health of people that experience this, right? Not just the physical health, but the mental health. So we use the Same Here scale from Same Here Global to realize that this is kind of a continuum. One day we can be thriving and we can kind of slide down that scale. We don't want to really stay in one place for too long. And, how do we take care of ourselves, right? They started teaching others exercises for the brain with their STAR exercises. They interviewed people that have administered CPR and talked about what that experience is like and, the supports needed. So we started to shift that 1 in 5 people have a mental health illness to 5 in 5. Every single one of us deals with life's challenges and can struggle on a day-to-day basis, especially when an event like this happens. So again, how is this digital citizenship? Well, we basically took this to an online showcase where the students of this class had a chance to go live and really wanted to expand global access to CPR. All right. We know this event happened. How can we then impact the world? And they went live. And if you'd like to see that session, that'll be shared out in our slides. I encourage you to watch it and learn from our students. That was always their mission, was to try to expand their reach. And that is really ultimately, how can we use technology, the phone that's in our pocket that can be used for good or evil, to amplify that message? And in what ways are you reaching other people? You can see in that graphic there, people are connecting at different times all around the world, and the messages that come across their screen, hopefully it's like our students aimed for, could be one that ultimately changes or saves someone's life, which is extremely powerful. So, our message here is, you don't have to have the entire project figured out in advance. We had this award, we knew what we wanted to do with digital citizenship, but we just weren't sure exactly what that was going to be. In this case, that meaningful work found us through potential tragedy, and we gave the students a challenge. Actually, they wanted to do it, they ran with it, and it mattered to them, and they rose up to this challenge in ways that we were beyond proud of. And, a lot of the things that we're showcasing here, I believe, as this loads in, is at this global student showcase, we're talking about high school students, we're talking about middle school students, older kids that are taking the lead on this. We have a classroom in Scotland, Mary Jallen's classroom, of primary students that also went live at the Impactor session. And our high school students actually tune in to learn from her kindergartners. And it's a beautiful thing seeing different age kids learn together. And, I'll just share some scenes of what this looked like for us. Is we had our kindergarten students here at Lakeshore join her students in Scotland. And I know when this comes through here, basically her class was teaching our kids about how to be inclusive, right? One of the other competencies of the ISTE Digit commit. And it was just, unprovoked. Our students are up and they're holding hands around the table, and, technology connected us, and they were singing a song together, and it was really cute. And we realized that, students of all ages can get connected online.
And speaking of connection, our good friend Melissa Hayes, Mrs. Hayes Fam, has her kids Zoom with people from 50 states and other countries. I know because I'm from Canada and I connected with her class last year. And I always look at this and the fact that she does it every year. And I think about all of the embedded digital citizenship lessons that happen here, right? But in addition to that, students are seeing in real time the positive and connective effects of technology and social media, right? So they're getting the opportunities as well as some valuable lessons. So we could wait until you think kids are ready to learn digital citizenship, or we can start creating opportunities at the primary grade levels. Our 6-year-old students will agree that that's possible. And in the next instance, we'd love to share with you something that's obviously dear to Michael and my heart, because we're both co-facilitators. Several years ago, Lee Castle, a founder of Digital Human Library, and I we're thinking about this topic, the lack of opportunities for students to lead in online spaces. So we created the Global Student Chat. It's gone through a couple of iterations in terms of the name. And then Michael joined us as a co-facilitator just a few years ago. And our mission: connect and empower K-12 students around the world to lead, learn, share, and act together to create positive change. And we began just on YouTube and Twitter, but now we've expanded our reach. We also, I think I saw Pareshi in the comment section, who's one of our social media ambassadors. So we're going to share a little bit about how it works so that you might be able to see yourself somewhere in the process. At the beginning of the year in September, we send out a survey to all students and teachers, and we invite student participation in terms of what topics are important to you. What would you like to cover? We then take those topics, we bring them to our monthly meeting. That's an image there of one of our monthly meetings where we plan, and the students create the questions. We go through a process where students create questions, and then they eliminate and they vote on the questions that are most significant to them. Then we decide, based on the questions and the topic, who might we invite as an expert? And we'll talk about experts in just a moment. Lee will then post to the globaledstudentchat.com, our new blog post. We also post it online, so you could have a look at what the topic is. You can get involved that way. You are invited. We always welcome student guests. So a couple of students from your class could join us, and then the rest of your class can join. We have an online live conversation once a month at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, which is streamed to YouTube as well as to Twitter. At the same time, we also take these topics, we add them to our Wakelet collection as well as Flip. So there are lots of different ways, regardless of your time zone, that you could actually get involved with what's happening in Global Student Chat. Our experts on panel, really the role for them is to consolidate thinking and challenge students with questions. And I have to tell you, every guest panelist says, wow, these students are having these conversations. I wouldn't have thought of this perspective, or they are so thoughtful in a way that we never understood. So they're acting as role models to other students who are watching, regardless of their age. But also, I feel like every guest panelist has really learned something from our students. Here in the next slide is the promo video that one of our students created a few years ago, just to give you insight as to what the Global Student Chat is all about.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Global Ed Student Chat for 2020-2021. Welcome to everyone on panel and those joining us from around the globe.
We are a student-led Twitter chat that connects K-12 students around the world to discuss topics and questions related to character, education, social justice, and citizenship.
So I noticed in the chat someone asking, how do we embed digital citizenship or literacy into the curriculum? Where do we have the time? The great thing about the Global Student Chat is that our topics work well with your curriculum. So at any given point in time, you can join us live or join us in the archive and watch this panel of students with your students in order to promote some of these conversations.
Yeah, I would add that we had a health class that there was one of the topics was body image, and that just fit perfectly for that health class. So, you know, you're not thinking necessarily digital citizenship in the health class, but this was, and so they said, wow, that was really, really powerful for our students to have that conversation.
Absolutely. So if you take a look at some of our topics in October, it was digital citizenship. We always have Media Smarts join us in October. In November, it was about careers, carving a path to success. Gen Z, who we are and how we learn, certainly that permeates lots of curriculum expectations. Smartphones and smart people, we added that topic as soon as the topic of AI started to come up. The kids really wanted to talk about that. Self-care in February, media influence on youth. April, Earth Month, talking about consumerism and the environment. And then just this past May, just a couple of weeks ago, we talked about student perspectives on banning books, which is certainly a topic that has come up in our English classes and in libraries for sure.
And, we're really thankful for Wakelet for giving us a space to curate all of these conversations. Our website is great, but Wakelet does an amazing job of taking us way back to the very first Global Student Chat, all the way through the most recent one, to link to every blog post, to see who the guest expert was, all of the questions. This conversation really doesn't expire. Smartphones versus smart people is going to be relevant to a conversation that may be had 3 years from now. So being able to curate these on demand for anyone joining us today, we encourage you to, stop at these slides and go to this Wakelet page and open up that collection, bookmark it, save it, and come back and get your students involved. This is really a for students by students initiative, which is really, really powerful stuff.
So we're going to leave off not with our voices, but the voice of one of our young student leaders who began in grade 7.
Much no one ever really talked about social media, and it was more just focusing on like classroom, working just within your peers in the classroom. And when I went to my second public school, all we really talked about was the negatives of social media. So everyone got this view of like, oh, like what this is what can happen, and like be safe. And I feel like no one was actually telling us like the positive side of it. And when I joined Student Chat, I really saw the positive side of it, and I was like, wow. And this just opened a lot of different doors for me, because I was like, this can be used positively, and this can just be better for students than what I've been shown. And I was kind of wishing that when I was younger, this was introduced to me, because I feel like I could have done so many more things with it.
And there are the words of Darcy, who actually came back this year in her grade 12 year because she so missed the camaraderie, the leadership, and the conversations that she had in Student Chat. So, and she's now graduating and off to university. So we are always looking for student leaders to join us on our Global Student Chat journey.
And, coming back to Lakeshore, and my experience is we were lucky enough to have Team Wakelet join us in person at our high school, and, getting our students that were part of the student ambassador program, having them here, having the conversations, realizing that this is a powerful way to get started on your DigCit journey. If you're looking for a place to start, right? We shared other resources. There's so many out there, but this student ambassador program is really just an engaging, fun, effective way to improve some of these digital learning skills and encourage student leadership. So the ambassador program puts the students at the center. I know it inspired our students to curate, to get into some critical thinking, some creativity, some collaborations, communications, citizenship, right? All of those C's that are so powerful. So it was really, it altered the course of the way we looked at students as creators. So thanks to the Wakelet Student Ambassador Program for that.
And I want to lead off, or end off rather, with the work of Dana Mitra. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her work, but she talks about student voice as a hierarchy. So at the bottom is listening. And listening is about students sharing their voices and opinions while adults interpret the information and possibly act on it. Next in the hierarchy, she talks about collaboration, which is defined as adults and youth working together, whereby adults initiate the relationship and ultimately have the final say. But where the magic happens is what she calls leadership, and that is at the very top of the student voice pyramid. In leadership, students make decisions while adults assist. And isn't that what modern education, in a world where AI can do something that we asked our students to do for 3 weeks in the past, isn't that what learning is all about? So she clarifies that when students are leading their learning with teachers facilitating, there is great benefit to youth and adults, and that it actually leads to school transformation. And currently, a lot of that leadership piece is seen in extracurriculars. But what we are passionate about is bringing that student voice, that student leadership into the classroom and into digital citizenship conversations. So we are moving beyond digital citizenship. And let's face it, friends, we don't have all the answers, right? Michael and I are passionate about this topic, but our experiences have really shown us that immersing students in positive, empowering experiences with technology really gives them the confidence to productively learn, lead, and thrive in our world, in their world, on and offline. And we do have some time for questions, and we thank you so much for being here today with us as we embark upon this very, very important conversation.
Yeah, and I did see one of the comments that popped up about, Digital Citizenship Week being a great place to start, and absolutely agree. There's so much good stuff happening and sharing happening during Digital Citizenship Week in October. But I like to think, and I think everyone always agrees that, we get inspired by that week, but you can make any week and every week Digital Citizenship Week with students, right? It comes back to, like you said, the leadership opportunities. How are we going beyond one digital citizenship lesson and making it just part of our work that we do daily with students? I think that's, like you said, that's where the magic happens. So, yeah, thanks everyone for joining in. Really, really excited to be here today to share this with you for Wakelet Community Week.
Thank you so much, Jen and Michael. That was absolutely incredible. I always love learning more about digital citizenship. Thank you so much for shouting out the Wakelet Student Ambassador Program as well. I think that's our sort of way of contributing to the conversation. I love the ideas of bringing in actual students to kind of direct their own learning. I love that really personalized approach, and I'm sure that there are a lot of teachers in the audience who are thinking about bringing digital citizenship initiatives into their classrooms and making an impact. And I think that's a really good approach. How would you go about selecting the students that you use to kind of champion these initiatives? Is there certain signs that you can look out for? Is it the ones who are the most enthusiastic, or how would you go about actually practically making that happen?
I guess I can jump in from my own experiences. So the Global Student Chat really engages kids who are natural leaders, but sometimes, and they're amazing, and their conversations are amazing. But what I found in the project, the design thinking project that we engaged in, is sometimes some of those students who you wouldn't necessarily think are natural leaders have so much to learn and share on the topic, and we actually don't give them as many opportunities as we can or should. So when we brought this into a leadership class, yes, of course, students signed up for this class, but some of them signed up just because they thought it would be an easy credit. And those are the students who are truly shining. And those are the students that are seeming to make the most authentic connections with the younger students as well. So I would say be open. When you give students voice, many of them are just not used to that and don't know what to do with it. But so many of them will take the baton and will really surprise you with what they do and accomplish.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Jennifer said as well. We're fortunate to have a leadership class. So, naturally, when a class like that exists, it's students that want to learn more about leadership and have an opportunity to lead. But, what we've seen is it's a ripple effect. Those students are doing things and creating opportunities for other people in the school that will say, hey, I want to be a part of that. And that ripple effect of good, it just becomes contagious. So, is everything all unicorns and rainbows on a day-to-day basis in our schools? Absolutely not. But we find that these opportunities are so important to shifting the way that DigCit works and looks in schools.
Mm-hmm. And we found ourselves that the the student ambassador program, it kind of really peaked. Like there was a huge peak during the pandemic, I think, because all of a sudden a lot of students were spending a lot more time on their devices and on their computers and online. And I think that from our side was a bit of a shift in digital citizenship. I think that it's always been important, but I think prior to the pandemic, it was one of those sort of like edge cases almost. It's a kind of like a bonus thing that teachers, may think about from time to time. But then the pandemic comes, everybody's at home, everybody's on their devices more than ever. And I think that the challenges that teachers faced that came from that, all of a sudden there's this huge demand for digital citizenship resources and initiatives and help and support and that kind of thing. Have you seen, significant changes that have come from that time during remote learning, during those kind of unsure times when a lot of us are spending way more time, students are spending a lot more time on their devices?
Yeah, I mean, I could speak to real quick the fact that just getting connected online became a part of the norm. Connecting to another class, like, right, we have to be virtual, so we have to know how to get on a Zoom, a Google Meet, a Microsoft Teams session, and that right there, when we did get back coming out of the pandemic to in-person hybrid learning and now full-time in-person, teachers were more willing to try these types of virtual connections and exchanges, whereas in the past, like you said, it was more of a one-off, like this was a really neat experience. It just became so much easier to do.
And I think for me, when I think of because so much of what we're doing is student-led, the global student chat leaders really wanted to tackle the topic of mental health and well-being. Right? It was important to them. And so we had a whole conversation about that. And I would say 2 of the student workshops are also touching upon, right, the idea of distractions. How do you balance online and offline, and how are you embracing digital well-being? Because students definitely are feeling, when they're thinking about some of the issues in the grade 9 and 10, and even their own issues, that, trying to navigate those struggles with being online more is definitely something that they're concerned with.
And I know that this may be a very sort of broad question, because it's something that whenever we discuss this subject, it always kind of comes up. And I'm only touching on it because Michael briefly did around social media. We know that students are using social media like more than ever. It's impossible to kind of assume that they're not. And obviously the kinds of things that they're being exposed to on social media every single day is unlike anything that me or you guys have, ever been able to access or would think of accessing back when we were young. How do we kind of navigate through that? And how do we, what very, very early steps can we begin to take to help our students develop more healthy relationships with social media and interpreting the things that they see online? And I know this is kind of like a random question, but I think that, bringing it right back to the kind of basics, how do we, well, I'm not going to repeat the question because it looks like you're very anxious to respond, Michael. So.
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm presenting alongside Jennifer here today for Wakelet Community Week, but this was something that I learned from her through her book, Social Media. And the term, when I've never heard the term digital first responder before, I read that book and it got me thinking. So I'm sure Jennifer will have a lot to add to this question, but yeah. So thank you, Jennifer, for social media and for inspiring me how to navigate some of what Misbah is referring to here.
Thank you. I would say, honestly, we need to be in touch with the reality of kids today. And the way that we do that, first and foremost, is to listen, to really, really listen and understand where some of their struggles are. And then if we are going to truly tackle this work in an authentic and embedded way, then how might we use their experiences in the context of our classrooms, right? The curriculum tells us what to teach, doesn't tell us how to teach it. And so we can definitely bring in some of those real life contexts into our curriculum, wherever it might be. It might be social studies, it might be civics, it might be English, it might be media, it might be math even, right? Depending on what those conversations are. I think it's just so important that we just make time and space for these conversations. And then as teachers, like good teachers, look at that curriculum flexibly and meet their students where they are. And I think that's the beginning. And to think of, like, we know so much research is out there about the extent to which kids are using devices at younger and younger ages, right? In kindergarten, if you look at some of the common sense research out there are kids using devices in kindergarten. So we don't start these conversations in middle school, definitely. We begin to listen, we observe their experiences, and sort of use that as our springboard for teaching and learning.
Yeah, really amazing points. And just lastly as well, because I mean, you can probably tell I love this subject. Just lastly, before we go, I wanted to just bring up this sort of concept. And I do apologize because it looks like the sun is taking away every single distinguishable feature of my face. We'll have to sort the camera out a little later. The exposure is really bad. But what I found is that the only thing that I can kind of relate to in terms of the relationship between, that's ridiculous.
You're glowing. You're glowing.
That's crazy. If I can get support in, tech support in, just to turn the brightness down, that would be great, because I have no idea how. But what I was saying was, I think the closest that I've come, right, to kind of empathizing and relating to a teacher's struggle with social media is actually with my parents. My parents discovered social media, not very long ago. And I found that part of me helping social media not affect them so bad is explaining to them the actual technology behind it, and explaining the business practices, and talking about the addiction element of it, and talking about there are algorithms, really powerful algorithms at work that are literally the only thing that they want to do is grab your attention through various pieces of content. That kind of conversation has been so effective in helping my parents understand the implication of social media. Why are they feeling bad? Why are they feeling anxious? Why, when they pick up their phone and they go on YouTube or Twitter or whatever, they're being exposed to this really disturbing content? How do they make sense of it? Would you say that would also work with students, rather than necessarily focusing on the actual content, focusing on why it is that they're seeing this content on social media in the first place, and taking it back into like the technology, business practices, the ethics of it, that kind of thing? Because I think that would be an interesting thing to kind of unpack.
Yeah, Jennifer had mentioned, maybe even math class, and I was a math teacher for 10 years. And, these are certainly conversations in terms of like, how does data work, and what are the statistics and the screen time and all of these things. I think, going back to our parents, right? Our parents grew up in a generation where they didn't have social media. They didn't even have the smart device in the back of their pocket. So now how do you navigate these spaces? At least, I feel like we're at an advantage in that we're able to have these conversations in schools with students at a young age. Right. But we said earlier, everything is evolving and so rapidly in the tech world. So I think it's such an important thing to talk about and have those conversations. And even though you don't have all the answers, I don't know how it all works under the hood, right? And but that's where, like in Global Student Chat, we can bring in an expert, and that may be something that students want to talk about, where there's an expert that we could pull in that lives that on a daily basis and can pull that in and really help our students thrive around that conversation.
Yeah, that's an excellent point with the student, with the experts. That's really their role. But it was funny because I just had a conversation yesterday in a careers class. I was working with a careers teacher, and we were talking about the extent to which social media is engineered to be addictive, and therefore, can it hurt your career? The conversations were so fulsome. And that's where, again, bringing in these conversations are so powerful, because as a teacher, I can bring in maybe that content knowledge that they didn't know. And do I know it? Maybe not, but that's where all of those digital citizenship resources really come into play. So I find personally that if I just take those resources and present them to my students, they're okay, right? Do I think that they go home at night having these conversations at home with their No, right? I don't. But when I take those resources that help me as a teacher become better equipped with some of that content, then I bring their voice and lens into it. Boom, right? It's far more effective, because then they start to share some of their own experiences, their own contexts, and that might be the experience of other students in the class. And that's where the conversations become really meaningful and authentic to them.
And I think that that's an empowering opportunity for our students, right? To be able to have a conversation with mom or dad or aunt, uncle, or even grandma and grandpa, where it's like, it's not the older person necessarily telling you what to do. It's that intergenerational piece where the younger person now is helping the older person navigate some of this stuff. I know we found that in our schools, that it's empowering when our students get to teach adults. So that's definitely a spark to that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Amazing. Thank you so much, Jennifer and Michael. Honestly, it's been a really refreshing, energizing conversation with you guys. And we really love that presentation. And I know that people are going to really enjoy watching it, not only now, but in the replay as well. To everybody in the who's watching this in the chat, please don't forget to grab your certificates. I know that we had a few people asking questions about the certificates. The link to the certificates will be shared in the chat, along with a link to all the resources that Michael and Jen have been sharing in the last hour. Please, everybody watching this, don't forget to share any ideas or screenshots of this session on Twitter using the hashtag Wakelet Community Week. So if you do this, you'll be in a chance to win a all expenses paid trip to ISTE 2024 in Denver, Colorado. And we actually have Mohammed Abu Hassan with us in the chat, who is joining us. He's the winner from last year and is joining us in Philadelphia this year. So we cannot wait to see Mohammed there as well. So yeah, it's a really, really big prize. So the more you tweet, the more you're in with a chance of winning. And then just lastly, we do have a spotlight session next, which is incredible. We're going to be speaking with some amazing Wakelet ambassadors, and that's all about exploring the 5 C's with Wakelet. So many ideas to pick up from there. But honestly, for the time being, Jen and Michael, thank you so much for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure, as always, working with you. If you have any final thoughts that you want to share with the audience before we go, the floor is yours.
I just say thank you and continue to be great. I hope you learned something new today.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting us. And I just really would encourage you to embrace student voice, to listen to what students have to say, and you won't be sorry. And please reach out anytime online on my website. I would love to continue the conversation. Please, if you have a student leader who would like to join us on Global Student Chat, we would love to hear from them, or join us when we begin again in October, often around media. We would love to have you. Thank you again.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody. And don't forget to follow Michael and Jen on Twitter as well. Your Twitter feeds are just an endless goldmine of resources and useful tips and information. So yeah, if everybody goes and follows at jcasatodd and at m_Draz. Thank you all so much, everybody. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next show. Bye-bye.
Thank you.